Welcome to Washington State Legends of Soccer and our series Conversations with the Legend. I'm Frank MacDonald, and for the past several years, Washington Legends has been collecting on-site, on-camera stories from our soccer community's legendary newsmakers. However, our conversation series is done remotely, and we are always taking suggestions for interview candidates via our website's contact portal at wasoccerlegends.org. Today, our guest is Debbie Barlow. Debbie has been at the forefront of our state's women's soccer development, first as a top player, then as a groundbreaking coach. In 2018, she was named one of Washington's top 50 soccer citizens over the first 50 years of Washington youth soccer. We're going to discuss her service to the game and observations over that time. So welcome, Debbie.
Thank you, Frank. Glad to be here.
All right, let's get started. Here's your first question, Debbie. Tell us where you were raised and what were the athletics opportunities surrounding girls and women in the 60s and 70s?
Well, I was raised in Washington State, lived here my whole life. I was born in Port Angeles, grew up in Port Townsend, and then moved to Auburn and graduated from high school in Auburn and went to the University of Washington. So I'm a Washington State person. We had no girls athletics when I was in high school still. Title IX had passed, but wasn't really moving into communities quite yet. I was right on the edge of it. So my athletic experience was junior high softball, recreationally, Girls Athletic Association in high school, and PE class.
Soccer was going on in your neighborhood, I imagine?
No, I never saw a soccer ball till I was at the University of Washington. I mean, of course, I knew what one was, but I never saw anyone playing.
Okay. So it was more a city sport, hadn't really reached the reaches of Auburn yet.
Apparently, yeah. I suppose I think I knew there were CYO leagues for boys, but certainly nothing for girls when I was growing up.
Okay. So you enrolled at the University of Washington. It's the early 70s. And at that time, there's a UW men's program, probably run on a shoestring. And it was coached by part-time by an Irishman named Mike Ryan. Tell us about Mike and your first encounters with him and what grew from that.
Mm-hmm. So I was a spotty student. I started the U in 1968. And then went for a couple of years and ran out of money and worked for a year. And then I went to Europe for a year. So when I came back at about the age of 23, came back from a year in Norway, I saw an ad in the UW Daily newspaper that said, going to try to have a girls soccer team, come on down to Husky Stadium. If you're interested, wear tennis shoes. So I thought that looked great and went down there, and we met down in the stadium on the turf. And Mike didn't look like that. He had one of his little purple sweatsuits on, and but he just leaped us immediately into passing with the inside of the foot and started training the girls that showed up. And some of them had played some high school sports. There were a couple that had run track or done other things in high school, but basically we were all learning soccer from the ground up.
And so how many constitute that original group, and how did it grow?
It was barely a full team, as I remember, that first year. And of course, it was a club team. It was a UW club team. It did not get intercollegiate status for 15 years. So we had nothing. We had our own T-shirts that we bought and shorts that Mike got from Denzel. And we finally, ended up learning to wear cleats. We were wearing cleats on the AstroTurf at that point. And it grew quickly, really quickly. By the second year at the UW, there were kind of like tryouts, and people got cut and didn't make it and felt bad, and then were determined to make it the next year. So it grew competitive really quickly.
And the relationship to the men's varsity, you say you're using Husky Stadium, I assume?
Yeah. And the grass behind the Heck Ed, that grass area back there, we use that a lot too. But yeah, we practiced with the guys sometimes. So I knew Danny Vaughn way back then. That would be 1973 or 74, something like that. knew Danny Vaughn and some of the other guys who were at the UW. We traveled with them once to go to WSU in a big old bus to play against WSU. Our league that first year was Green River was in it, and Highline and WSU, and then a bunch of women's teams, local women's teams, because those were the only college teams that were even in existence.
And how would you characterize what the level of play then for your team compared to now? Where would it, no comparison?
No, we were beginners, and we learned quickly, and Mike was an A licensed coach already, so we had great coaching immediately. So Mike worked on basic skills. He worked on passing and trapping. We did not work on heading. We did not work on defending. We didn't ever have technical training on shooting or kicking the ball, but lots and lots of passing and dribbling. That was our main thing. I was pretty obsessed with it. I lived in the U District, so I would go down to the intramural fields down by the stadium and take a ball and just practice on my own, just throwing the ball up and trapping it and practicing, trying to kick it well. And so I really was obsessed with the whole notion.
Okay. Did you have like-minded teammates?
No, I practiced alone at that time. When we went to practice, though, everybody that went was the same thing, kind of addicted to the whole thing. It was real heady. The fact that we got to use Husky Stadium, come in through the tunnel and practice or hold a little tournament or have games in there, that was amazing and huge and wonderful. The fact that we got to practice on the grass behind there, it was nice grass. And for a while, Mike was employed as the groundskeeper out there. So Mike was mowing and taking care of that area. And I think he had been laid off or something from his, he was an iron worker, a molder at the shipyards. I think he'd been laid off. So the UW hired him to do grounds during that time. So sometimes he'd, come straight from the mower over to practice.
So you spoke about the teams that you played, Washington State, the community colleges, and then you mentioned open teams or adult teams. Not to say that you guys aren't adults at this point.
Right.
So what kind of blossoms out of this club organization that Mike's put in place?
Yeah, great question. So I think we only played maybe 2 years, or I only played maybe 2 years with Mike as a UW team. And then Mike was very, very competitive. So he saw quickly that we needed to get out of that format and get into a bigger format. So he started the State Women's League. Mike was the first president of the State Women's League. And then I think Bernadette Nuna maybe was second. And then Janet Slauson was in there. We had some really good early leaders. And I was the president for 1 year, maybe in about 1976 or 77. And it grew really quickly. I mean, it went from 10 teams to 100 teams to 200 teams really fast. We had divisions within 3 years. We had to have separate divisions because there were too many teams to have in one division.
How do you account for that exponential growth? What's going on that's feeding that, obviously, interest, but what is stimulating the interest into action?
Well, at that point, it was coming into schools. Soccer was coming into schools, so girls were playing. So the girls who came and tried out with us already knew as much or more than we did. Our benefit was we'd already played for Mike, so we understood his little quirks and his strategic method of attacking the game. But people were coming to us, girls who had played with us, young women, were getting cut in favor of these 18-year-olds who were coming out of high school, who were better athletes and had earlier training in soccer. So it got competitive really quickly.
So when we talk about the Washington State Women's Soccer Association, because there is no girls division of Washington youth soccer in general, all the females are going into the Women's Association. Is that correct?
I don't know that, Frank. I don't know. I mean, I knew that they could, well, I don't think that can be true, right? Because weren't Kozars and those girls playing as youth somewhere? I'm not sure. I don't know the answer
Okay.
to that.
Okay, but there was a mixture, there was a youthful component to some of these women's teams.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely.
Okay. Um, so by the latter part of the 70s, the growth is underway.
Hmm.
There's divisions, and at some point, uh, if Mike is competitive, he wants to even push
Hmm.
the boundaries further. I don't know who necessarily organized it, but there becomes a national,
Yeah,
a regional national tournament here in the late 70s, right?
right. We went to regionals for the first time the year that there was a national tournament. So that would have been
1980.
80, 80, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So yeah,
What was that like? Now you're seeing not just the people from throughout Washington, you're seeing people, and you probably can drop some names of people we know that you're now seeing at tournaments, in the regional and the national, and tell us about the team that's coming out of Washington or teams.
mhm. So I was at the older side because I had done all that messing around in college with working and going to Europe and coming back. I was older than a lot of my teammates. So by 77, 75, I got married, and I was the only player on the team married. That was kind of, wow, someone's married on our team. Um, and then in 78, I got my first teaching job in Enumclaw. So we moved and we built our own house. And then I started my teaching job and I started coaching. So I had all these competitive demands on my time. And then by 1980, I was pregnant. So when we went to the national championship, I was 2.5 months pregnant. I was throwing up on the airplane. I was not, and it was so hot and humid in Florida. It was awful. And I'm not good in the heat at my best. So, um, that wasn't my best playing week right there. But that was the first time that we had regionals, and we went to California for regionals beforehand. And the Blue Angels were also there, so there was regionals for over 30 at the same time. So that again, it just exploded just suddenly, and I don't know who was in charge of it. And I got to tell you, we were so cocky. I didn't care who we played, didn't know anything about them. We didn't scout anybody because we were the best, and we didn't need to worry about anybody. And we just had no awareness of that level of scouting and being aware of the competition.
Okay. Um, so by the second year, people are not subjected to the heat and humidity of Miami. They're coming here. It's Mike somehow organizes or makes a bid, and the championships for the over 30 and the women's open are here in Seattle at Memorial Stadium. And I think, as I recall, the U.S. soccer annual meeting was held at the same time. I remember Whitey Craigs was inducted into the Hall of Fame, I think, that week. So now the Sharks, the Blue Angels, they're defending champions. You're out, maybe a fan in the stands, but with a kid in arms. So tell us, you're starting a family. Where are your peers? What's the promise of going beyond this to a national team program?
Frank, I was really out of the loop for 3 years, probably, between the babies and starting work and building our house. I didn't go to those games when they were in Seattle. I was just not in soccer at all during that time. Well, I was still coaching, but I was not playing and really didn't. Our team was never a team of people who cared about each other off the field very much. We worked like dogs for each other on the field, but it was a tough group, and you had to stay awake and alert to be part of it. And once you were sidelined, you were doing your own thing. So I can't even speak to what was going on nationally during that time. We met at our Legends Night, Carrie, Cranda, Hunt, and Jan Snezik, and those guys were part of that next little bubble of people who were on that first national team on paper. When Mike This slide you're seeing right now is when Mike took the team to Italy. It was the first ever international competition for women, and there were 8 Washington women on that team. And then Mike was superseded by Anson Dorrance, who took over the women's national team and obviously had great success after that time. But all that happened, within about 3, 4, 5 years, and they're just boomed.
Okay. All right. So fitting, you say you're still coaching, so you're not totally out of the loop here, but how do you juggle it? Or did you just concentrate on focus on the family, so to speak, during this time, and then at some point decide it's time to jump back in?
Yeah, great question. I tried to commute to keep playing with the Blue Angels at a highly competitive level for a couple years after I had my kids, but it was tough after working all day and coaching and then trying to drive to Redmond usually for practice. Living outside the city put me out of the epicenter. So it just all got tougher. So I finally just said, this isn't working at all. I just really need to concentrate on having my adult life, actually. And so I still played recreationally in the area. I played indoor a lot. I played outdoor with people that I liked locally, but did not play at the most competitive level after that. I just couldn't maintain that with all the other things that I was doing.
You're like many players, we'll catch up with your coaching. You said you'd begun coaching well before you stopped playing. Tell us about how some of those first opportunities come to be, and where they took you in the game.
Yeah, well, Danny Vaughn was kind of the teacher's pet on the boys' side, and I was kind of the teacher's pet on the girls' side from the UW program. So when Mike, Mike was always looking to earn extra money. Mike was a blue-collar, hard-working guy. He didn't make a dime off of our teams, never made a penny off of us, and had to pay for all his own transportation and plane tickets and everything. And he was the one that was out scrounging all the time to get sponsors to pay for uniform or travel for our teams. But so he would bring Danny and I along as kind of his little demo people. So Danny and I would do the drills when he was doing clinics. That was kind of my first coaching. I coached in Lake City for a girls' silver team for a little while, but I did Camp Brotherhood with Mike. And then Mike was also a co-owner with Cliff at Northwest Soccer Camp. So Mike brought me and Danny Vaughn to Northwest Soccer Camp. So I started working there and worked there every summer then for 30 years. So that was part of an ongoing soccer family for me. When I got to Enumclaw High School, there was an opening for the boys JV coach. There was only boys soccer at Enumclaw my first year. And the AD really proudly came over and offered me that position when I first got my teaching job. And when we talk about supports for me as a coach, he was this little chubby former football guy who smoked constantly, and he would come to my field in his big old Cadillac. He was so chubby that he had a swivel chair that he had to swivel toward the door to be able to get out of his car. But so he would pull up and open the door and swivel sideways and smoke as he watched me coach. And he was such a great advocate for me. It was amazing because he really easily could have been the kind of guy that didn't care about girls' sports and wasn't willing to support a woman coaching boys, but he absolutely had my back every bit of the way. And it was just a gruff, crabby little guy who did all the right things.
So you're meeting the movers and shakers. You got Mike Ryan, you got Cliff at camp, all the various people that go through those camps, the varsity players at the U. Tell me about how this leads into getting then the varsity job at Enumclaw, and I'm kind of curious about the effect of that on a wider scale beyond your athletic director.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was kind of where I first started to get my confidence. I coached the JV for 3 years, so I earned my stripes with those boys at Enumclaw. And then the girls varsity started 1 or 2 years after I was doing the boys. So then I had the girls also. And the girls did great. Immediately, we had Kathy Ridgewell on our team, who was a great goal scorer and had great speed. So all I had to do was teach the other girls how to put the ball through at the correct angle, and then Kathy could get on it and score goals. So we were killing teams because of her ability to score. So that was really fun. The boys, yeah, this is one of the varsity teams. I took over the varsity after 3 years. The prior coach was Tom Goff, who had coached at Seattle U, and just recently passed away like 2 weeks ago. But he was the varsity coach at Enumclaw, and I worked with him for 3 years, and then I took over the boys varsity. And yeah, I was a little, some of the parents were a little skeptical. But, I would actually take some of these guys with me to practice in Seattle with Mike Ryan so that they could watch him coach and see what it looked like at the next level. I don't think I ever had a problem with the players' confidence in me. And I certainly didn't have a problem with, as I said, the AD and the administration at Enumclaw were awesome. Had great support all the way along from the men around me. The men who saw me coach at Enumclaw brought me in to coach ODP at the district level. Yeah, I got selected to coach a state all-star team. And all that came out of the high school arena from people seeing me coach boys there. And, men were incredibly supportive. And the parents, once they got to watch us play, I think I didn't have problems with parents other than normal coaching problems. Why isn't my son the center forward? That kind of thing.
That goes with the territory, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. That's part of it.
So licensing, coaching licenses, you talked about Mike being among the first to get an A license around here. And they don't separate coaching schools into male and female. So tell me how that goes. How do you pursue your coaching licenses?
I did. It was great. And really, Jimmy Dunn was the genesis for that. He was running some F clinics for the state. And so he ran an F clinic at Northwest Soccer Camp. So during our lunch times and during free time, he would run a little F clinic and we'd come down to the field. A bunch of us earned our F clinic one summer. And he was the one who said, for your professional development, Deb, you need to do this. And I said, I don't need it. I have all the coaching jobs I want. I don't need it. And he said, you would love it. So I did. I went and got, I started with the F, and then I got skipped the E, went to the D, then I got my C and my B. So national coaching licenses. And was I treated well? Absolutely. I think at that time, still everybody, and maybe they still are, really hungry to have some women to move forward. They wanted women coaching women. They wanted female role models for the girls. So, boy, people were great to me. I was really helped and promoted by people within soccer.
Great. That's good to hear. So are there any parts of the game that you thought that by now, when we're doing this interview, that the women's game might have progressed to a point that would be beyond this? Are we behind in any respect, or how do you feel about it, where we're at?
I want to answer that, but I want to back up a little bit, because while I was saying that people were very supportive, there also were just giant blind spots about a woman coaching men, and I want to tell a couple stories about that. Okay. One was I was nominated Coach of the Year for the Seamount League boys, and we had the team photo. The photographer from the whatever that was, the Kent Journal or someone, came out to take our picture, and I was there with the clipboard of the kids' names, and I was checking them in, and we were milling around waiting for a long time. And I finally said, are we waiting for somebody else? Because I think the kids are all here. And he said, yeah, we're waiting for the coach. That kind of stuff happened to me a lot. I mean, I have about 10 of those kinds of stories where I'd be out in the middle talking to the referee in my coach's jacket, and he would say, well, as soon as the in-clock coach comes, we can get started. I have 100 of those stories. And it wasn't bad intent by anybody. It was just assumptions. So here's the best one. I was the head coach for my son's probably U10 team, and my husband was my assistant coach. And we were, the new rule had just been passed that you couldn't pass back to your goalkeeper. So our kids were playing, and the ball shot up and poor defensive clearance. The ball shot up in the air and kind of held in the wind, spinning, and then our player had cleared it. It spun in the air, and the goalkeeper ran out and caught it. And the referee called back pass to the goalkeeper. That ball had been 20 feet in the air, hanging and spinning. And I started yelling from the sidelines and the referee wouldn't look over there. And I finally walked out on the field and threw my clipboard and started yelling. And he turned and looked at me and marched straight over to the sidelines and gave my husband a red card. It was awesome. It was awesome. So I think in many ways I got protected by being a female in the boys' game. This sometimes worked for me and not always against me.
Apparently the officiating schools weren't at the same acceleration process as your experience. So where do we I don't want to say that, I mean, we have the greatest national team in the world for the United States. So it's hard to argue with that, but is there anything that at some point you thought would be further along in the progression?
Of course. I mean, it's shameful that women are still fighting for funding and recognition. It's shameful. I can't even believe that we have to fight our own association, USSF, to pay for the development of women when they've clearly led our country in the world for 20 years, 30 years. So yeah, it's just shameful. I am so happy to see women's professional leagues. And I love it that Anson at our Legends event said, what you need to do is get out and support those women's teams and go to games and pay to get in and go to women's collegiate games. And that is how the change would happen. I don't know what the pandemic's going to do to all of that, but he's right that if we don't support the women with money and popularity on a local scale, it's not ever going to be recognized bigger than that.
Okay. Anything amaze you about how far it's come since that first meeting with Mike and the other players there on Montlake?
Of course. I mean, it's a beautiful thing now that women are recognized across the world for their achievements in soccer. They're unbelievable players. They're so skillful and so confident, and just carry that to girls everywhere. I love it. And, when we were playing, I remember somebody's son saying, you guys are pretty good, but you kind of look like you're playing underwater. That was the commentary about the speed and flexibility of our game. But you couldn't say that now. The women are playing such an amazing game with such power and such skill. I think everyone in the world can see how amazing they are as athletes and as soccer players. So, just the acknowledgement that women can be athletes that are that good and that strong and that smart, that's huge. And the idea that, I represent thousands of women who played at some level and then went out and took those mega skills out into my real life and became a leader in a school district and was able to use all those skills from playing and coaching, all the toughness and all the organization and all the self-discipline and use it in the wider world. And women get to do that now, even if they can't all be on the national team. So I think that's amazing. It's given women a new strength.
Yeah, you can see it out there. Well, Debbie, thank you for leading women, taking the charge, and being among those who brought this game to the stature it is, wholly and also the women's game within that. But thank you very much. As anyone in our audience can tell, we could easily jump into another chapter, and we reserve the right to start that chapter in another interview. So we'll probably see you again, Debbie. And for all those out, so thank you again. We've obviously come to the end of this interview, but I would like to thank all of you for watching and continuing to watch our Conversation with a Legend series. For more on the history of Washington State soccer and to learn more about the Washington State Legends of Soccer, go to wasoccerlegends.org. We appreciate your support, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.